let's go over what to expect. Awesome. So thank you all for joining us today. Today is definitely going to be building off of the other presentations we've had. So I hope folks have at least a basic knowledge there, because there will be a lot of build. Today we're going to talk about faculty networking in person and over email. I'm going to focus a lot on like making that connection via email to set up a time to meet in person. So we'll talk about, well, I guess I'll go to the slide and map out what we'll talk about. But so first today we're going to have Kylie Keel, one of our current transfer students who I was lucky to work with at the community college and here last year, and hear about some of the research that she's doing and how she connected with a professor to begin her research process here at UCSD. And then we're going to talk about the research. So how to get started, how to decide who to reach out to, how many people to reach out to. We'll spend a little bit of time on my recommendations for how to make a resume that's appropriate for research specifically, if that's something that you should be asked for. And then finally, we'll talk about crafting an email, what should be included in that, what to not include in that. And then finally, breaking down a timeline. So figuring out how to put this process in a way, all the steps, how it's going to work best for you in your life. And then we'll have some time for questions. It's a pretty packed agenda, so I'm hoping we'll have some time for questions at the very end. And like I said, we'll go ahead and start off hearing from Kylie Keel. I'll let her do an intro for herself and share about some of the great stuff she's been doing this summer.
Sure, yeah. Hi. I don't know if you want to keep the slide up or not. Totally up to you.
Okay.
But I am Kylie Keel. As Tessa said, I transferred last year. I transferred from Mesa College and City College in San Diego. I'm majoring in ICAM music, and just to talk a little bit about that, it's interdisciplinary computing arts for music technology, which is like a nice major of like music, visual arts, and some theater technology also. Which is fun. And then I'm minoring in theater, kind of also with that same emphasis in like theater technology. I'm currently working, and like currently I'm like here right now, currently working in the audio spatialization lab in the Qualcomm Institute under Shirok Yadagari. I have some notes that got moved around, so let me direct to that. So yeah, so it's super cool to see what kind of like the timeline is for what you guys are discussing today, because I'm like, wow, I didn't know these things, and it would have been super helpful. So you're all like totally in the right place of learning the right things to do for research. In terms of my transfer journey, I'll say I like didn't hit the ground running in terms of like getting involved in research the first quarter I got here, and I think that's okay. And so something I think just to also mention is like coming to UC San Diego and transferring can be a really overwhelming experience and can be different for everybody. And so I just kind of wanted to say, like, I didn't hit the ground running, to say, like, if your first quarter doesn't go as planned, that is a-okay. But winter quarter was kind of my bounce back. I was like, okay, I want to get out there. I want to make connections. And I think I got really lucky because during my winter quarter, I ended up taking classes with professors that were doing research in a field that I was really interested in. So something I was always really interested, what I'm really interested in is making theater more accessible and making art more accessible and immersive. And one avenue of doing that is through audio spatialization. And so I had two professors. Typically when you're going into a class, your professors will like talk about their research. And I had two professors that first week of winter quarter talk about audio spatialization. And I was like, oh, that's what I'm interested in. That's what I want to do. I was kind of able, through them explaining what their research was in, I was kind of able to connect that to what I was interested in. And so I was like, I need to talk to these people. And so something I had heard from community colleges, from professors, they'd always said like, oh, your professors at university aren't going to have time for office hours. And I think there are still students that I'm with now who are like, yeah, no, my professors never have time for that. But I have never found that to be true for me. And I think coming in as a transfer, you have a big advantage because you're coming in with your upper division courses, which end up being a lot smaller. So professors, especially when you get into like really specific areas of study, your professors, I think, have a lot of, not have a lot of time, but do have interest in supporting you when you're really interested and show that you're genuinely interested. So in the case for my office hours, they were all after just simply like an hour after the class that we had. And so I just stuck around. I was typically the only person who did, and that meant I got a lot of one-on-one time with a professor to be able to talk about like what their path was in their research, what they were focused on, and kind of also got a chance to talk about like what I was interested in. And so through doing this, I had a professor, Nathaniel Herring, who was a PhD student interested in audio spatialization, who was in this program called IDEAS. And IDEAS is this program at UCSD that kind of is like this intersection of science and art where they do a lot of performances. So whenever Nathan mentioned him, since he knew my interest, he was like, oh, you should come to this performance. And that was essentially how I got connected to the research job I have now. I showed up to these events and I had done research on what staff members and faculty members were doing what I was doing. In this case, Shirok Yadagari is the director of the audio spatialization lab. And I saw him after one of the events and I said, hey, I'm really interested in this. Of course, he gets a lot of students that are like that. And so he was kind of like, yeah, okay, you're interested. I can't wait to see you in one of my classes. And it was kind of a dismissed situation like that. And I was like, no, I want more than that. And so I kept showing up, and the second time I showed up and I was like, hey, it's nice to see you again. I'm really interested. Like, do you have any space open currently? Like, what projects are you working on? So I got to know the projects that were being worked on, but he was also looking for someone with more of an audio engineering background that I didn't have. And so he's like, you're not really what we're looking for, or saying things like, oh, we don't really have space at this time. And something for me was like, I don't need to be paid. I was looking for all of these avenues of like, I don't know. I didn't really want to take no for an answer. So I just kept showing up and having conversations of saying like, see me. And so the third or fourth time I had visited one of these events are really fun because you get to watch a performance and then after they have food for everyone to talk. And I admit it, I'm really awkward. So I was like standing at a table by myself and maybe got kind of lucky that a Qualcomm Institute employee ended up standing at the table I was at. And he was like, can I stand here? Who are you? What are you about? And I said, oh, I'm really interested in audio spatialization. And he's like, oh, that's crazy because our lab needs people for audio spatialization and that's where I work. You need to meet Shirok Yadagari. And I was like, I know, but like I don't know, he's already kind of not been interested. I'm not really sure. And he was like, no, you need to meet him. So what happened was kind of crazy. I waited 2 hours and I kind of didn't, looking back, I'm like, oh, that was an interview. I kind of ended up in this position where I was sitting down with Shirok and he was asking me a series of questions that you would be asked at a job interview. And I was nervous, but I kind of put my best foot forward and said, like, I really want to be here. I really want to be learning. I know I don't have the background that you're looking for, but I'm really motivated by my purpose of like making theater matter and making theater more accessible. And I think that was really helpful because what I hadn't known then is Shirok Yadagari actually was in the theater department and was in sound design. And so that was probably a green flag for him. But I think it was also really helpful for me in this case that I had the employee there because during the interview, he was asking me a series of questions that I was saying like, no, I can't do this. Oh, I can't do this. Which is like kind of bad in an interview. But what was shocking at the time was the employee kind of interjected and was like, if you had asked me all of these questions at the beginning of my PhD, I would not have been qualified. So I think I got really lucky in the sense that this employee had stepped up for me to say like, hey, you're asking way too much of this undergraduate student. But at the same time, if I had not kept showing up to both the office hours for Nathan and also just the events that this director was having, I would super not be where I am right now. And so, yeah, so right now I am kind of a production assistant / lab manager / undergraduate researcher at the audio spatialization lab. My first project on that interview kind of ended with him saying, email me and we'll see what happens. And he had a project come up 2 weeks later. He was like, hey, we need a production assistant on this. Don't know if we can pay you. And I did really well at that. And 2 weeks later, he ended up hiring me. So now I'm here. I'm one of 2 like part-time researchers throughout the school year. and I was a production assistant for a Stewart art collection piece, and then I ended up being the lab manager. So whenever we have recordings or performances in the lab, I assist all of those. I also got the opportunity to be a production assistant for Peter Sellers, who is a professor at UCLA, because professors at different universities work together. So that was a really cool experience. And right now, my main focus is in VR development. So I got moved to doing actual research as opposed to like lab management, and I'm doing VR development in volumetric capture and our space 3D algorithm. So that's kind of my story. I put down a couple of pieces of advice, and so if talking through my story, I know I kind of ramble, talking through my story, this didn't come out clear. The things that I would like recommend to you going forward with research is that you really do need to believe in yourself. You may not have the background they're looking for. You may not have the background experience that they're looking for. I kind of mean like you may not have the skills, you may not have the experience, but if you believe in yourself, that's a really big push. I think a lot of what professors and faculty members are looking for is that you believe in yourself, because then you're more, in their eyes, I think you're more likely to learn and be interested in learning. A really big piece of advice I have is to keep showing up, because if I didn't show up, I definitely wouldn't be here. And then my last piece of advice is that if you're in a field and you're like, I don't know what research really works for what I'm studying, or maybe on our campus, there isn't exactly a professor who's focusing on exactly what you're looking for, I would say think like interdisciplinary. Think, okay, maybe something in the psych department isn't focusing on this thing. Maybe they are in music. I say this because I'm interested in like psychoacoustics, and right now in psychology, we don't have necessarily a project that is in psychoacoustics or music therapy, and so I'm able to do acoustic modeling and learn a lot that way. Yeah.
That was great. Thank you so much. And you touched on a couple of things we had mentioned last session in this as well. I wanted to reach out and see, and we won't keep you for the whole time. I know you're actively working, and we are going to rush through some things here too, but does anyone have any questions before we hop into the rest of the presentation? I was really excited that Kylie Keel has been able to come and share, because I think that persistence piece is something folks are scared of, or maybe like scared of being annoying, or scared of sending another email and being ignored. And I think the fact that like she kept doing that and that was successful is really worth hearing. And I think you can hear it from someone who's lived it rather than me just telling you. So Ed, I do see a hand raised there.
Just to clarify, are you a double major?
No, I'm a ICAM music major, and then I have a minor in theater. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So how did you draw the line from psychology and music? How did that work? How did you do that? Like, there's
yeah, so there's definitely a lot of different avenues of ways to look at it. I think for me, I knew what my interest was, and I spent a lot of time on websites of saying like, okay, I'm gonna read all of the staff bios. I think Tessa talks about this thing of like, okay, we're gonna go shopping for faculty, which is a really funny and great way to put it, but it really is spending a lot of time like looking at bios and seeing like, okay, this connects to what I'm interested in this way, this connects in this way. And so I had wanted a more like psychology based research. But in terms of my field, and I think also being an ICAM music major maybe helps me think interdisciplinary, because that's kind of what we do. We have psych classes in our curriculum. We have music classes. We have computer science classes. So it's a really interdisciplinary major in itself. But just kind of seeing, even doing, something I love to do is pull up the faculty page of their bios and do a word search, saying like Control F music, and see which professors are doing anything there. Or if you're interested in like cognitive science, you would look in psychology and the cognitive science department, and then maybe even like visual arts design, because they all have like connections.
I will say too, you were more unique in students who I met with last year, and like you knew exactly what you wanted to research, and you were kind of trying to find an avenue to research that specific thing. And for some of you that might resonate, and for others, so Kylie Keel was more looking like, what department can I go and find and study what I want to study? Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
versus
think so.
other folks are like, I'm interested in a lot of things and I don't know how to narrow it in. So I think you came from it at a different angle than some folks probably are coming from a similar angle, but other of you might be like, I'm trying to figure out what I want. Kylie Keel was like, this is what I want and how do I figure out how to get there? So that's a little
Yeah.
bit unique in itself. That might resonate for some of you.
I'll say also, I think I found what I was really interested in and what resonated with me through doing all of that research, because I think I didn't exactly know what connection I wanted to make exactly. I think I knew I wanted to make theater more accessible. I didn't necessarily know at the time that audio spatialization was a great way to do that. So it's through a lot of conversations and also like that word search of like, I think at the beginning of last year, I didn't actually know that music therapy was a thing, didn't know that psychoacoustics was a thing. And so it was, honestly, it was looking up a lot and finding words of like, I don't know what that means. And then finding that's like, oh, that's exactly what I was looking for. Yeah.
Alan, did we answer your question? I saw that you had a hand up and I want to make sure that if it's there, we're addressing it.
Oh yeah, that was pretty much.
Okay, awesome.
Cool. I got a message in the, like a direct message in the chat asking what different types of research can we do at Qualcomm. And I'm gonna say off the top of my head, I don't entirely know the full-fledged answer to that because we are placed on campus. We're in Atkinson Hall is where the Qualcomm Institute is. And what the building is really like made for, what it was designed for was to have different research teams come in pursuing any kind of research really. It's not,
No.
I think audio spatialization is a really fun thing in this building because we do actually have a lab that was, when the building was designed, was specifically designed for audio spatialization, but that's really the only thing like that in this building. Most labs are very open and they get configured for different kinds of research. I know recently we just had a lot of researchers not leave, but not take up space in this building anymore because of the pandemic. They realized they didn't really need to be face-to-face in a building all the time. But the Qualcomm Institute is really interesting because it grasps onto different ideas and like goes through with, it'll fund whatever they see possibility in. And so off the top of my head, I'm working on VR development and volumetric capture in the audio spatialization lab. Other sections we have in our lab is beamforming. I don't know if people will be familiar with that. It's kind of a different way of audio. I also work on Dolby Atmos, so we're doing that in here. We work a lot with our Space 3D algorithm. I would suggest, if any of this is interesting to anyone, I would look up the Qualcomm Institute Sonic Arts, and you can see a lot of the projects we have going on through there. But also off the top of my head, we have a adolescent behavior cognitive development research project going on upstairs too. So there's a lot of different things going on here.
Qualcomm isn't necessarily focused to the projects. It's more of a funding route for professors from any different background. It's a funky one because it's not like everything in Qualcomm, like Haku Hulai is all data science, but this is not like a capture of theme. Awesome. Any other questions? I hate to rush you. This has been really good, but I'm like, oh, I want to make sure we get them all their tools too. But any other questions that folks have? No. All right. Well, thank you so much for presenting. I really appreciate it. And again, sharing your tips. Those were fantastic. And a lot of what we've talked about, but I think mean more coming from someone who's living the experience. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much. All right. So let's go ahead and we'll move forward with talking about the reach out. So in our last session, we talked about really gathering and figuring out what faculty we want to work with. She mentioned that I used to call it faculty shopping. We now call it searching for green flags because faculty didn't like the idea of being shopped for. So we're rebranding that a little bit, and that search for green flags is a little bit is what we're calling it now. So that was our last session. So once you have figured out what research you're interested in, I usually recommend figuring out what 2 to 3 folks you're ready to reach out to. And that's going to be, I think that's going to be a good start, because you might not hear back from everybody. So the who. Figure out who your top 2 are. And I really recommend that table process that we talked about last time, ranking them on a 1 to 10 scale. So that way you say, okay, these are my top 3. And that's where you start to go and you do that deep dive into their website. So that's where you can read some of their recent publications. And as she was mentioning in her presentation, she's great. She could have done this for me today. But as she was mentioning, really starting to look up the things you don't know, because I think we have almost blinders on to all of the different research that's going on. And there's not an expectation for you to know everything or even a large amount of all of these different things that are available to you. So start looking up those things, learning about what research is being done. And this process might take you through winter quarter. This process might be what you do this next week, but figure out who your top few are. And then you're going to want to send out to 2 to 3 folks. When do you want to actually make that research piece? This was a big question you all had last time. And I'm kind of choosing to answer this and not answer this because I want you to be able to do this at your own pace and what feels right for you. If you went through all of the different programs that are available and you are excited about something that's coming up, I want you to make sure that you're giving yourself a minimum of 5 weeks to reaching out to a professor who you want to use as a faculty mentor. So for example, the McNair program application usually closes around October. So if you are set on applying to McNair, that means that probably you want to make sure that you're contacting a faculty member, because to apply to a program, you need a faculty mentor on your application. 5 weeks gives you a chance to send those emails back and forth, make a connection, and then usually there's something like an interview, some kind of conversation that happens. And that gives you time to make that connection. And then if there's any questions about what work you'll be doing during the program, you have a chance to have that conversation with a faculty. So 5 weeks is the minimum amount of time. That's usually when folks would come to my office when I was doing one-on-one meetings. 5 is about, after anything closer to the deadline than 5 weeks, I'd say it's not impossible, but it's going to be a stretch, and it's also relying on the other person to respond. Some recommendations, not requirements, are to avoid summers. A lot of faculty are not on contract, so it might not be the best time to reach out. Some faculty don't open their email at all over the summer, and then when they start the school year, they might have anywhere from 500 to 10,000 emails to respond to. If you do send over the summer, you can always send a reach back out during like week 3 and following up on your email. We'll talk about respectful ways to do that. And then I also just think about strategically about what professors are doing and when their calendars might be busy. So if you just completed a midterm or you just completed finals, they're going to be grading those, or they might, the week right before week 0 is also one of the busy times for faculty. They've just come back on contract. So avoid those busy times so that you're not just joining a pile of emails, but you're kind of going into a more organized email inbox. And don't be afraid to make a follow-up reach out. And we can talk about that a little bit later as well. And then finally, what to include. Make sure that if they, on their Join Us page or on their contact page, if they ask you for specific things, you go based off of that, and you don't necessarily need to follow what I'm mentioning. So if they say include a transcript and a resume, or fill out this Google form, that's your go-to. If they don't give you directions, which many of them won't, I'm going to give you almost a little to-do list of how to approach what to do from there. A good practice is to include a resume and a transcript as well when you send an email out to a faculty member. And we will talk a little bit about what should go into that resume. And for you all, if you haven't started at UCSD yet, that transcript can be from your community college. And once you hit like winter quarter, once you have your first or 1 or 2 rounds of grades, you can just submit your UCSD transcript. I would still recommend sending both because UCSD doesn't combine GPAs. So that means when you finish your fall quarter, that your entire UCSD GPA is going to be what you got for grades in the fall. So that's typically a harder quarter. You're adjusting to the quarter system. It might not be where your GPA shines quite like it did in the community college. So I always recommend sending in both because that's going to show a better screenshot of how you perform as a student versus what might be your worst quarter and might not be. Maybe you do well, but just provide both transcripts to give them a full picture. Any questions here before we move into more in depth? All right. So getting that resume ready. I am not a career services advisor. So these are my recommendations for how to approach a research specific resume. None of these are required. And the thing about resumes is they're so personal that you could ask 5 people for their advice and they could tell you 5 different things. When I was applying for jobs in my field, I sent my resume to 5 people, and what some people said was the best part, others told me to get rid of. So the more people you ask, the trickier resumes can get because everyone's going to have a pretty strong and different opinion. But let's talk about how to just approach it. And some things to help you out during this process. So what I recommend for everybody is go to Career Services website. And you're all still seeing the moving screen, right? It's not just stuck on my presentation. Thanks, Ed. We'll go to Succeed in Your Search, create a resume, and scroll down to Download Resume Template. What this is going to give you is a nice Word doc that's pretty basic and is taking a long time to load on my computer that we can start with as kind of a fresh base. Give me a second here because Word is frozen. Here we go. So I like what UCSD gives you, but I want to give you some extra things to kind of change and to add. And again, this is for a research resume. When you're ready to start applying to jobs within your career, you want to meet with your associate director for your area of study. That's who's going to be able to prepare you and has connections in the field. So that's going to get you more of like your career ready resume, and you'll be able to kind of build off of this. But as we look at this, here are some of what I think just helps out a little bit here. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you have your associate's degree on here. Many of you have already earned an associate's, and that's worthwhile in having present. If you have a GPA of above a 3.5, you always can add that, and you want to have it likely over here. Some things I would just tweak about the resume that I see here. I would prefer that you address or highlight your degree rather than where you got it from. So if I was doing this for myself, I would say that I had a BA in liberal studies, which I can't spell, and that I got that from San Diego State, rather than having the university highlighted and then a degree, especially if you're applying to your research in your area of study. But that highlights a little bit more of what you're doing. Then you can have your month of graduation here and below. So you'll do this for your associate's degree, and then you'll do that for your degree at UCSD as well with your anticipated graduation. Another thing that in a professional resume, you might not need this, but this is really helpful when you're reaching out for research. Use this summary to talk about your goals, especially if you are applying to a grad school or interested in a career. That's what you're applying to here. So this might say incoming UCSD transfer student, passionate about research I'm thinking of a student I worked with last year in equity within live births among diverse mothers. And having that specific here you can give interest to your research, and it's going to be able to speak to wherever you're applying. So this can be short and sweet. You can share, you have experience in customer service. What you don't want this to be is just fluff. When I say fluff, I mean good team player, strong customer service skills. All of those things anyone can say. So make sure that you're using measurable things that you know are true about you. If it's something that you could hear from any of your friends or you think is just overused, it's fluff. Everyone's going to write it and it's going to take away the meaning, no matter how true it might be about you. But use this to really describe why you're a good fit for the research that you're applying for. Then other things that I like to change are, I like to split the experience. I like to have related experience and additional experience. And the reason as to why is because then we can manipulate it. And rather, like, you might be working this summer at Petco. I worked retail my full 4 years of college, and there are valuable skills. You want to make sure that that's on your resume. But we want to show things that are related to your experience first. So it allows us to manipulate date. What I do is I also flip the company and the position. So and that's again, personal preference. For this, I probably would say, I was a key holder and I worked at Anthropologie for a couple of years. And that was my position. So something like this would be my additional experience. If you're somebody who doesn't know how to fill a full page, and that's what we're really asking is for you to have one full page, what I would recommend in that related experience is, do you have any classwork from your community college or from the college that you're transferring from that's related to the area of research? For someone who's bio, have you taken a lab that gave you certain microscope skills? And what you could do is you can say that you took biology lab 201 in spring of 2019 at Miracosta. And then you could say learned X microscope skills, did research bibliography on X. You could also do this with projects, and this can help you show what related experience that you have, even if it's in coursework or an independent project that you've done for a class, and relate that to the lab or the group or the professor that you are applying to. And then the next big question is skills and activities. This is going to make a lot of sense for some. If you're someone who's computer-based and you need to know like Java or computer languages and all of these different things, or if you're someone who's more traditional STEM and you need microscope skills or knowledge of all of these different processes, this might make a lot of sense for you. For someone who might be more in the social science space, this may not be a strong area, or maybe you would want to mention like Qualtrics or something that's more survey-based. But this isn't necessary. I might cut this if it doesn't relate to what you're applying for. But then again, I think I mentioned this, but I want to touch on it again. You having work experience, even if it's not directly related to what you're applying for, shows them that you can show up on time, that you maintained a position, and that you have good time management skills. So yes, highlight your skills that are related, but having an additional experience that shows that you worked 5 years at Petco and you know how to deal with grumpy customers, or that you did 3 years of restaurant experience, and having that is valuable. There is valuable in showing that you were a retained employee, and having that here as well. So that's all I have. Any questions on this resume piece? Ed, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so I'm old and I have lots of experience. I have maybe 2-3 pages of government experience,
Yeah.
which will be for political science. I think it's gonna be great. Would you recommend I kick that down to 1 page, or maybe the last 10 years, or maybe how would you summarize?
Rule of thumb, I believe, is 10 years. For you, I might also, what I do, because I think there's still value in showing that you retained a long-term experience. What I've done on my resumes sometimes is I make something 1 line so that it's still acknowledged, but not taking up too much space. So what that can look like. Let me see if I can like manipulate that. I'm just using my own experiences. So like for me, I did workplace was, I was a shift lead. And then I do a line, and that was at Kate Spade. And then I say, January 2021 to October 2024. So you could do something like this that still shows a long experience. It might be that some of those positions have relevant experience. So then you can, again, manipulate your timeline by putting that in related, or you can use this to still have it recognized, but not taking up 5-6 lines. Helpful? Okay. And again, there's no rules. These are just kind of some of my things that in working with students, we figured out together. Any other questions? What if you don't have a lot of experience is something I'm getting in a private chat. That is a great question. If you don't have a lot of experience, then use that related experience and tie in your coursework that's related, or even put a specific project. I have a student who hadn't had any previous work experience. She had worked at a frozen yogurt place, and the rest of the things that she put on her resume were all coursework that she's done. So you have experience, it just might not be in the workforce, or maybe it's not in a lab or in the positions that you're applying to. But think about all of the things that you've done class-wise, or and putting your associates or putting your previous degree. And then maybe you'll have a slightly longer summary. Maybe it will be speaking to what you're really passionate about here. But the goal is to fill at least 1 page. If you're someone with a lot of work experience who's coming back to college, maybe you want to have 2 pages. The key is just making sure that you're filling an entire page, because white space looks bad. White space reads as little experience, and people look at a resume with white space on it, and it's looked down on. So it's just and don't go over 3 likely, but 1 to 2 would be kind of a sweet spot, and making sure that you're taking it. I like this format because it fills up the page nicely. They have a format to where it's filled out and there's none of the graphic design or photos or anything. This is a pretty good blank slate. How I make it more exciting is I highlight my lines and my categories, and I make them a color, and that's about as exciting as you need to go. You could also tie in volunteer experience. Good questions. Any other questions here before we keep moving? And that's my dog sighing. If you hear that, I'm sorry.
I had a question.
Yeah.
I was curious about students that are in visual-based majors, such as like visual arts and things like that, putting together a resume that's professional, but also shows visual literacy and ability. Do you think that it's better to just always go with what UCSD has offered as the template and keep it clean and simple and just words? Or do you think that there is time and space to like add that element of personality, so to speak?
Yeah. I would say my gut, and from conversations I've had, and we get training from career services, is steer away from the artsy. And what I would do is maybe make a Google folder of your visual pieces, or if you have a website, and then you could link that and say, maybe that's, maybe instead of education, you have visual, I don't know, my art pieces, and you have a separate category that has some hyperlinks. Something like that would still allow, like a portfolio, would still allow you to share your visuals. And if you're applying to a visual art area, I think that would be appropriate additional attachment. But resumes aren't supposed to I mean, we get them as staff. I hire student staff, and I'm on search committees for professional staff, and it's never really the preference. I think you can be strategic, and you might be someone, because your field's a little different, maybe you would want to talk to talk to your associate director. But where I think you could maybe be creative is like, could you make these a more fun font and add a color, and
Right.
still have some kind of a pop, but not have it be too much.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sorry. And again, it's preference. You might go talk to a visual arts professor who thinks it's wonderful to have your art pieces somehow woven in. But I think my teaching goes more towards like the traditional old age professional style.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. So we'll go back to sharing. And again, these are my recommendations. None of these are things that you absolutely have to follow, but I think they give you a way to weave in enough of your lived experiences through your coursework as well. All right. So let's talk about crafting a professional, strong email to reaching out to faculties. Some of the do's and the don'ts. The big thing, and this is almost like a checklist when I read through students' emails that they used to send me, is including the why. So why is, and we'll look at some email examples later, but this is really your golden ticket, is your why, specifically that professor. How Kylie Keel mentioned, like that having a shared passion is really what ultimately got her to tie in. You want to tie this to why this is interesting. Is this something that you're interested in pursuing grad school with? Is this something that you're passionate about because X, Y, Z? But make sure that that why is there. Also, if you're applying for a program or showing some sort of commitment, time commitment, this piece is great because it shows them that you're willing to give them a certain amount of time. You're showing them some time commitment. And if you're applying to a program, it shows that you've done your research to figure out how you're getting professional funding. And this gives you some ways to do it. Again, we're going to go through a template that will break this down a little bit easier, but these are just some of the bullet points to know. Tie in to what you know and how they are doing. So in reading through through emails that students have been sending to professors, the strongest ones are where you're able to make your own critical connection. So it might say, I read this paper X and saw that you were studying XYZ. I learned about this in my community college class that I took in spring of 2015, and it was really fascinating to see how these are getting real world plugins. So anywhere where you can make that critical connection, it shows that you're using your critical thinking skills and that you can tie it to your base knowledge in some way. And having that sentence, I actually didn't have that before, but I read it on enough of the emails that I was looking at, and it just was really impressive. And that was what I ended up adding it, because this is just like an extra cherry on top, is making that connection piece. This last one, I almost don't want to have it last. Make your ask clear. This is the number one thing that when I get emails from students as a professional myself, or when I read emails that are going to professors, this is what's usually missing. What are you asking for? You might write this wonderful email that says, I'm really fascinated in your research. I'm an incoming transfer. I like this. What do you want? And I have students, I read emails from them and I'm like, this is great. This is wonderful. You sound awesome. What are you asking me for? How can I help you? That ask, this is always what's forgotten. So I'd almost encourage you to make like a checklist of these 3 things and make sure that when you read it, you're hitting all these points, because I can guarantee you can write this wonderful thing and then not ask for what you really want at the end, and they don't really know what the next steps are for you. The don'ts. Do not do any casual greetings. I've had professors say that if they read things that start with hey, hello, or addressing them, including their first name, some professors will take this as extremely disrespectful and not respond to the email or read further. You want to make sure that it's dear Dr. blank or dear Professor blank or Provost blank. But this is not a casual email. You're reaching out to them, and this is professional. Do not commit right away or beg. This sounds extreme, but some of you may have come here and you're like, oh, I would die to be in this specific lab or this specific group. But there's also a piece of an interview that's making sure it's a good fit on both sides. So it's best to ask for like a meeting or a connection. And you can make that in a way that's not like, I would just do anything to work in your lab, because would you? Do you want to be the person who's just sweeping up the rat poop in a lab? Or those are when you commit to doing anything that doesn't necessarily serve best for your journey. So make sure that you're not just diving in right away. And then make sure that you reread everything and check that your ask and your everything else is included in this. And what's a good suggestion for the email is a question I'm getting in the chat. Oh, that's everyone's favorite question. I think undergraduate seeking research opportunity or undergraduate interested in XLab, something along those lines where it's very clear, and they have an expectation and they're not just gonna delete it. Some people have asked, like, is it try to be catchy? Is it fun? But then those can get confused. We get a lot of like educational platforms that email and try to spam us. So try to keep it as like, this is what it is. Yeah. Bio major, junior bio major, seeking research opportunity, something along those lines. Questions here before we dive into the actual email itself. All right. So my recommendation that I made for before was to make a table. My recommendation at this stage is to make yourself a template. There'll be things that are standard across all of your emails, and there'll be things that change every single time. So you're not going to send the same email to every professor, but they're going to have a lot of the same structure. So don't make yourself write an email over and over again. But here is an idea of a structure that you want to have, and that we'll talk about what you'll need to switch up for each professor. And I saw a hand pop up for just a second. Did you have something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, sorry. I was going to ask about the subject of the email. What should we do? Like, what's the best
Yeah.
subject?
So for subject, we want to make sure that it's something direct. So it could be junior and your major seeking research, or transfer student passionate about X research. Just something very clear and direct, not something like, don't try to be catchy with these, because that's where it could get confused for like a sales email.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So here's my recommendation of a loose structure on how these emails can look. That's just really easy to follow. Ideally, you don't want this to be much longer than like 6 sentences or so. First paragraph, intro to you, your name, your major. If your future aspirations are connected with the research that you're applying for, mention that. I'm a pre-med student who's fascinated in epilepsy. I see that your lab is studying X effects on the brain, and I think this would be great. So that's just a brief intro and connection. If you're applying for a program, make sure that you're mentioning it. I'm hoping to apply for the Winter Trails program. This would provide me $1,000 stipend for working 1 quarter in this lab. And that's just a way to say, hey, I've done my research. This is how I'm proposing that I'm going to get paid. I'm bringing my own external payment. So that's a great thing to include. Paragraph 2. This is really the meat and the golden ticket. This is what should change for every single professor that you write an email to. But it is appealing to the researcher. Why their lab? Why their research? What was it that was fascinating about that? What experience do you have? Even if it's a class. I began learning about X topic in my coursework, and I was really fascinated to see that your lab is doing a deep dive here. That's just really what I've thought about as pursuing as my PhD, or whatever connections. And you can even tie in readings. You don't need to like use MLA or MPA formatting, but you can just say, I read your recent publication and found that X was interesting. And again, that critical reasoning, that tying into what you know. Is it appropriate to say good morning or afternoon? I think that's fine. You just want to stick away from like, hey, hello. That can be read as a little bit too casual. I think dear or good afternoon or good morning, those things are fine. Dear doctor is safe. So something like that could work. But again, this paragraph 2, that's going to be what should change for every professor and what's really important. And finally, paragraph 3, or it can be a continuation of paragraph 2, depending on how you write it, this is your ask. Be specific. Is there a time in the coming weeks that we could meet in person, or if you have preference over Zoom? Do you have office hours in the coming weeks that I could attend? So this is assuming that maybe this is not a professor that you have, but you're asking for what office hours. This office hours ask is one that I like because it makes it not have to have them go out of their way to make that approach. And again, this is something that is usually left out, is this explicit ask. If you're applying to a program, it might be appropriate to say the application for Fall Trails closes on, and there's not a Fall Trails, I'm just giving an example, closes October 1st. Would you be available to meet in person, or could I attend your office hours sometime before September 15th to discuss this opportunity? But making sure that you're making an ask. Then including thank you. I always say thank you for your time and consideration, or thank you for your time, something respectful along those lines. And then your full legal name. If you have a preferred name, feel free to use that as well, but just make sure you're including your last name. And then I always recommend including a PID number, because that gives them a way to have a second identifier for you. And then don't forget attachments. Again, those recommended attachments are a transcript from your community college or where you're transferring from, as well as a resume that's similar to what we just talked about. But something along this line, you can make a template for, and then I usually have red, bold, all caps for the things that I want to switch out. And paragraph 2, and you might even want to tweak paragraph 1 slightly to make it match their research more. But something like this, going to be short, sweet, to the point, and how to make a connection. Any questions here? All
I
right.
have a question.
Yes.
So like, because you said that we should maybe reach out to like 2 or 3
Mhm.
at a time. So like, I don't know if this is far-fetched, but if all of them agree to meet with us, like, how do and we decide on one, or we get one, or we somehow get
Multiple opportunities.
multiple opportunities? How do we politely like?
That's a great question. That would be, and I would want you to meet with more than one person, because potentially this is someone who you're going to be spending 20 hours a week working for the next 2 years during your academic journey. So asking interview questions like what is your schedule like during finals week, or are you flexible to work around classes? You want to find what's the best fit. So I would say go ahead and meet with both folks. And if something shakes out to where you have to reject a professor who had given you an opportunity, you don't want to ghost, but you would still want to reach out and say, you know, dear Dr. X, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me and sharing about your research. This was, I was really fascinated, but I found a really great fit for me in X lab. And I think this is going to set me up better for the things that I'm interested in focusing on. And it's not, I think that would be along the lines of what kind of an email you would send. I've had students who ended up having to do something similar. And ultimately, that's why you're not making that overpromise in the email of like, oh, I would do anything to end up in your lab. Oh, actually, I met with you in person and I don't really like your vibe. So you're setting yourself up to do almost like an informational interview. You can even ask that. Could we do, I'd love to set up the time to do an informational interview with you and learn more about what you're working on. So just making sure that you can say, you know, I found something that's going to be a better fit for my schedule and I was able to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, Ed.
So you won't always necessarily be taking classes with this professor. This is when you're ready to start doing research. You're putting your feelers out there and you might want to learn more. So you send them an email saying, hey, I heard about this research. I'd really like to learn more about it. I'm passionate about this. What do you think? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. In your first, if you want to make a connection this quarter, it's rare that you're going to be able to get your first choice professor. So you want to set yourself up for reaching out to more than just like, you might not be able to just attend office hours. If someone who you're doing a class with this fall has interesting research, that's great. Go and attend those office hours. But my assumption is your first quarter, you're prioritizing what you need and what you can get into rather than the faculty who's doing the most fascinating research. That seems like a privilege that isn't probably going to factor into your fall enrollment for this quarter.
But we don't really need to be doing research yet. We can just
Correct.
be getting acclimated to school and then from there start doing this research.
So you could be sending these reach outs week 5 of fall quarter to someone who you're not enrolled in a class with yet to begin researching in winter. Something like that. Yeah. And that's what we'll talk about next too, is the tying it all together and kind of giving you a timeline piece. I know we're getting low on time, so I'm happy to stay and ask questions, but I want to make sure we get everyone all the info. So if I were to give you a checklist and an order in which to do things, I want to provide this to you. So I always recommend checking out programs first, one, because they might include a faculty member, and two, to know when their application opens. So if you are like, I just would love to be a McNair scholar, that seems like the best fit. That would be something that would get you in the application timeline a little bit sooner than some of the other programs. So make sure that you know what programs you're interested in so that you can set your timeline up for success to where you're emailing professors that you're interested in about 5 weeks before that application closes. From there, you can start looking at faculty, how we mentioned last week, and using that table to keep yourself organized. In the off chance you look at 40 different faculty and find your area of interest. And during this time, you might be able to identify some of the things that you're interested in. From there, you'll want to identify and narrow down to your top choice faculty. 2, 3, 4 tends to be kind of a sweet spot. You don't have to reach out to them all on the same day, but know that it's normal to not hear back. So it might take reaching out to a couple, or as Nicolette had asked, you might get 2 offers, but you might just meet with someone in person and be like, I just don't like this energy that I'm having. And you want it to be a good fit. You're going to give a lot of time and energy to this group. Next would be prepare a resume. You could do that at this stage. You could wait and do this later. And then finally, this is where you want to write that email and send out to folks. You could even send this to a professor whose class you're in. You could say, I'm in your class this quarter. I'm really fascinated in the work we're doing. And I would love to schedule a time to meet with you more. And then for here, once you've connected with a professor, they kind of know what to do. Typically, they might say, oh yeah, come into my group. And they might have I've had students be surprised because there's the professor and a postdoc or a grad student who's there as well. Sometimes that first meeting is almost like an interview. And that's why you want to make sure that you've read and looked at some of the topics from their readings. So reading their recent work and having those notes, because you might be pulled into almost an unofficial interview or sometimes an official interview. And then from there, ask them for support on answering some of the program applications. Trells, one of the questions is like, what project are you going to be working on? McNair has one similar. So that's where it's nice to have a connection already with the faculty and be able to have them support you in that. And then the final step will be submitting your applications. I always recommend applying to multiple to have the most eggs in your basket. And if you're applying to mostly undergraduate research hub programs, you have the opportunity to prioritize those. So if you get into your first choice, you won't get into your second choice, and more spots will be open for students because they give you the option to rank. I see that we're at 12. I think that was my wrap. Oh, my last thing I'll say is, if you've attended all of these sessions, we're going to have a networking event on October 11th with faculty. So keep an eye on your inbox. If you've missed any and you want to do some makeup, you'll need to watch those and do the quizzes by August 31st, because around September 1st or the first week of September is when I'll be sending out the invitation to this. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just start our poll, and I'm going to open for questions, and I can go back to things as needed, but I want to make sure that I'm respecting all y'all's time. And we can keep going. I just want to make sure that no one feels like they're missing info by leaving at the time that we had agreed to. All right, I do see a question in the chat. You're in progress for a bachelor's degree. Yes, let's go back to this resume here. So you want to have, so for this, you would show a month in the future. Some people say it's best practice to say expected. That's kind of assumed if it's a future month. So you could just say June 2025, June 2026. You don't, and have that here. So maybe it says, I would say BS in psychology, UC San Diego. Month would be like June 2026. And that would be enough to show that you haven't graduated. There, it's not, you could also say expected or anticipated. To me, I think that's kind of obvious because that date hasn't happened. Good question. Can you access info on the faculty that will be attending that event? Not as of yet. I reached out to provosts, and provosts are going to be inviting faculty that they know have positions open. So I don't have that full faculty list built out. Once I have all the attendance completed to see who's been attending these sessions, I'm going to try to see like what majors we have trending and see if I can try to pull a little bit more there strategically. And that's something that I'm waiting to see as attendance pours in. I just took attendance for the past 2 previous sessions from Zoom and from the makeup quizzes. And I'm going to try my best to make the most sense for y'all. If there's 2 students, I'm not going to invite the entire department. But I can provide that info to the provost as well. And then for attendance, I just track that on how that comes in through Zoom, because Zoom keeps track of that. So if you've attended for, I think usually if it's 10 minutes or so, I count that. I see how long do we have to do attendance, makeup quizzes. Those are all going to close on August 31st, so that I have time to appropriately take attendance for those. Any other questions? I'll make sure that I include these slides and the reporting in the follow-up email in case things come up, and these will be available for you. You saw my method of going and finding the research resume. Yeah.
Sorry, I wanted to ask a question about coffee with professor. Should we utilize that instead of an email? Like, hey, can we, like, as a more informal way of talking to them in the beginning? Are all professors open to it? Because some professors that I've been interested in research for, they don't accept undergrads, but they do accept coffee with a professor. So in those cases, should I talk to them? It's like, hey, you know, like I'm interested, even though like not now, but in the future, can you like point me out on how to be accepted, like how to be qualified for that position?
Yeah, I think especially if they mention explicitly that they take coffee with a professor, there's no downside in doing that. So you can make that reach out, and you could say, like, I think that would be a place where if you want to just be transparent and be like, hey, I saw that you don't accept undergrads, but I'm interested in pursuing a master's or a PhD. And can I talk to you a little bit about that? I think you'll be less likely to get a response there just because, and I'm being a bit negative, but there's not necessarily an immediate benefit to them. So you might be less likely to get a response, but that's not reason to not make the reach out. And also keep in mind, I met with a bunch of faculty a few weeks ago for a presentation, and there are so many. There are 35,000 undergrads here, plus grad students who are reaching out to faculty. It might just be a matter of time. If they're taking a 1-hour meeting with everyone who reaches out, that can take a lot of hours of their week. What's the best way to discover professors' research? So I would recommend looking at going back to what we talked about last week. So going to your areas of interest, and we posted some databases and things there. I would go to those slides because we did a big deep dive into that. And then I liked what Kylie Keel said. She was opening just all the faculty pages and control finding specific things that were interesting there. But that's where you would want to tap into faculty descriptions and bios and looking at like the topics. So if we go to UCSD, psych, that's where we can look by research areas, and then from here start to learn a little bit about the different research that's going on. All majors will have some version of that, and that's where you can start that process. Other questions? Great questions so far. Are y'all feeling like you have some ideas of how to move forward? Awesome. That's what I hope to hear. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and end our recording and stay on if anyone has specific questions. Or else, thanks so much for attending. This has been great. This is the first year we've offered this. So I realized I said all that stuff like I was still sharing my screen. So I'll go ahead and just share my screen again. But going to, so research areas and then showing the different specific topics, that could be one way of finding faculty who you're not taking classes with. Christina, I see hand. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, good afternoon, Tessa. I have a question, maybe not related to the so how to fund research, but more like since we're first year transfer to UCSD and we don't know anyone there, so I was wondering if we have like a study group that we can connect with other students. Yeah.
That's a great question. I know folks set that up sometimes through the Discord. So that would be, I think Discord is a big way where a lot of folks make connection. I'll share my screen again. So if you go to the Triton Transfer Hub website, that's something that under new admits, you can get connection to our Discord page somewhere along here. Implementation, virtual care package. Trying to find that for you. Let's see. Discord's a good way. And then I would also say that a lot of folks, I spelled Discord wrong. I'll try to find that link for you and I can follow up. But another thing that folks do is they just do homework regularly in our conference room. We have about 12 seats in there. And that's where I found that a lot of people just in spending time have made close friends. That's how we hired a lot of our peer coaches. Even some prospective students have come in and just like hung out in our living room area. Yeah, I didn't want to call you out by name. But I think just by being around the transfer hub, you're exposed to other transfers, and usually people come in and ask a question and it kind of just becomes a whole office like meld. So I think if you're struggling to find community in classes in other space, not to say that you will, but just having the physical transfer hub, a lot of people are there spending time. Yeah.
So like I'm the person who actually like goes to this transfer hub all the time. I work right by campus, so it's been like every lunch it's been very useful. The information, the wealth of information that all of the students and the administrative have, like, it's amazing. But also I found out if you go to your like major department, I went to my linguistics department, just went in office hours. And they're in summer, so they're empty. So they're just excited to talk to you, and honestly, made a lot of great friendships and a lot of great connections by just checking office hours for my department, see who's available, and just either email them or sometimes just drop in. It's like, hey, are you guys available to talk? And a lot of them are surprisingly are very excited to talk to new students.